You are fired up for college football. You see your team ranked high in the preseason AP poll. You believe all that wisdom of crowd stuff about the accuracy of this poll to predict both bowl games and March Madness. Despite the truth in this statement, no predictor is perfect. In this episode, I'll use the preseason AP poll as a benchmark and identify 3 overrated college football teams. Before we get into 2022, let's go back to my history of predicting overrated college football teams. I started doing this back in 2015 on SB Nation. It's moved over to this podcast over the last few years. I skipped 2020 due to the COVID year, but that still gives us 6 seasons of data. By my record keeping, I've gotten 12 out of 18 overrated teams correct. So I get about 2 and 3. I'll tell you about my process at the very end, but to give you a sense for how I track the record, let's look at what happened last season. I had USC overrated at 15th in the preseason AP poll. Clay Helton got fired after 2 games and they collapsed to 4-8. I'm calling this one a win. I had Oregon overrated at 12th in the preseason poll. This looked like a terrible call early in the season as they started 4-0 with a win at Ohio State, but they finished 10-4 and no one was going to confuse them with the 12th best team in the country after they got embarrassed by Utah twice. I'm calling that a win. I also had Notre Dame overrated at 9th in the preseason AP poll, and they actually did better than that. They went 11-2 last season. I could maybe argue that this was a win because the metrics had Notre Dame outside of the top 10 and Notre Dame got a little bit fortunate to go 4-1 in one-score games. But look, they were one spot away from making the college football playoff. I'm calling that a loss. Let's look at my 3 overrated teams for 2022. It is tough to agree with Paul Feinbaum. His hot takes are legendary. For example, he thought there was no way that Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh would ever beat his rival Ohio State. There was something wrong with his brain. He missed on that one last year. But Feinbaum thinks that Notre Dame is overrated at 5th in the preseason AP poll. And I think he's right. To be 5th, you can lose once, maybe twice during the season. Notre Dame is almost definitely going to lose week 1 at Ohio State. I give my best numbers to members of the Power Rank, and by these numbers, Ohio State is more than a 15-point favorite in this game. Sure, there's about a 14% chance that the Fighting Irish pull off the upset in Columbus, but it's unlikely. Heading into the rest of their season, let's assume they get wins at North Carolina and against BYU. These look like tough games. But at the end of the year, they have to play Clemson and USC. Right now, my metrics have these games as a toss-up, as it's almost certain that both of these programs are going to be better than they were last season. So after the Ohio State game, they're going to be lucky to escape those 4 games with only 1 loss. More likely, it's going to be 2. Look, I get the hype over Notre Dame. This program has only lost 2 games in each of the past 2 seasons. The brand recognition of Notre Dame and this track record recently implies a high preseason rank. And on defense, Notre Dame should be just dandy. Last season, they ranked 14th when I look at adjusted success rate. This is the metric that I trust the most to evaluate a unit. They returned 9 of 12 players that had at least 400 snaps last season. Defense should be good. But now, defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman takes over as the head coach. Brian Kelly left for LSU. Freeman is very young at 36 to take over one of the highest pressure jobs in college football. As recently as 2015, he was the linebackers coach at Purdue. He took over a co-defensive coordinator role the next season in 2016 before thriving at Cincinnati for the next 4 seasons. Now he's the head coach, and he's got a lot of questions on offense. Tyler Buchner won the quarterback job, and he's considered a dual threat with both passing and running. But the offense was only 48th when I looked at adjusted success rate last season. They're going to need to be a lot better than that for Notre Dame to live up to be the 5th best team in the country. Before Michigan State played Ohio State last season, it leaked that Michigan State was going to give Coach Mel Tucker a 10-year, $95 million contract. Tucker had Sparty off to a 9-1 start with a big win over Michigan, but this is national title winning type money. Tucker was in his 3rd year as a head coach, and he came into last season with a total of 7 wins. Then his team got obliterated at Ohio State. The score was 56-7. He signed the contract the next week. Should we applaud Michigan State for ignoring the small sample size of 1 game? Or are we going to laugh at this contract in a few years? We're going to start to get some answers in 2022, as Michigan State is 15th in the preseason AP poll. It seems like the proper reward for their 11-2 season. However, there are warning signs. First, Michigan State went 4-0 in one-score games in 2021. Record in one-score games regresses quite strongly to a mean of 500. And we just need to think back to some of those one-score games that they played in. Michigan State beat Nebraska by 3. They beat Indiana by 5. And neither of these programs is exactly instilling fear in anyone, especially Indiana last season. Secondly, Michigan State's defense was terrible last season. When I look at my adjusted success rate numbers, again, the metric I trust most to evaluate a unit, they were 70th. They do return a lot of production. 9 out of 12 defenders with 400 snaps are back, so these players are going to have to improve this season. On offense, quarterback Peyton Thorne is back, and so is wide receiver Jalen Reed. This is a good start. However, Kenneth Walker III, the running back, is no longer with the team, and they're going to have to replace that production. Tucker did hit the transfer portal on both sides of the ball, and he's going to need contributions from these players. The markets have Michigan State at 7.5 wins. Even if they go 8-4 in the regular season, it's tough to think of them as the 15th best team in the nation. Pat Narduzzi took over the Pittsburgh program as head coach in 2015. And up until last season, he had oscillated between 5 and 8 wins each season. A good program, but certainly not one that was about to challenge Clemson to win the ACC. Pittsburgh broke out last season. They went 11-3. They got a huge win over Clemson, and they won the ACC title. You have to remember, heading into last season, it was unthinkable that Clemson would not win the ACC with the way they have dominated that conference. Pitt toppled the king. What happened? It was really all about the offense. When I look at adjusted success rate, they were 31st last season, and they were 18th when I look at adjusted success rate on passing plays. So let's look at what that metric was the previous few seasons. In 2020, Pitt's passing success rate was 90th. In 2019, they were 80th. I don't have the data for 2018 for success rate, but we can look at yards per pass attempt, adjusted for opponent. In 2018, they ranked 103rd. The reason I'm citing all 4 of these seasons since 2018 is because those were the years in which Kenny Pickett was the quarterback at Pitt. He took a clear jump last season. Pickett is off to the NFL. Offensive coordinator Mark Whipple went to Nebraska. You can see why I'm a little bit hesitant about that hire for Scott Frost, because it's not like Whipple had a long track record of success. And then perhaps most important, wide receiver Jordan Addison transferred to USC. They are starting over with the passing game. We'll see how this all goes for Pitt. They named Keaton Slovis the starter at quarterback. He's the transfer from USC. At this point last season, Slovis was considered an NFL draft pick. Things clearly didn't go his way last season as he lost his starting job. Pitt's going to need him to perform. Pitt also does have almost all of its production on the offensive line and running back. On defense, Narduzzi has always run a great program. Over the last 3 seasons, they've never been worse than 18th when I look at adjusted success rate. Pittsburgh is 17th in the preseason AP poll. I think this is too high. Of course, they do have a win total of 8.5, so if they do end up 9-3, when you look at that record, they could seem like the 17th best team in the nation. Maybe they finish there in the poll. But my contention is, when you look at the underlying metrics, it's unlikely that they're going to be as high as 17th. They're not a top 20 program. In this episode, I've talked a lot about teams and wins and losses and what that implies for their ranking. This makes me seem really square. But these choices for overrated teams are actually grounded in my most predictive metrics. In the preseason in college football, I rely heavily on a market model. This model is based on win totals and the price for every team to go over and under. And based on this data, I extract a rating for every team that's consistent with that market win total. I've found this to be the most predictive of any preseason model that I've looked at. So when you look at this model, Notre Dame is 9th, and this is based on 8.5 wins, and 9th is significantly worse than the 5th that they are in the preseason AP poll. Michigan State is 26th in these market numbers. This is based on 7.5 wins, and this is significantly lower than the 15th they are in the preseason AP poll. So Pitt is slated for a whole win over more than Michigan State. However, they are worse in the market rankings. They are 30th. This is both significantly worse than the 17th they are in the preseason poll, and this just reflects the weakness in their schedule in the ACC. Members of the Power Rank get access to these numbers. Members get access to all of my predictions for college football and the NFL. You can learn more at thepowerrank.net. That is a URL that will take you to a place on my site where you can get more information about becoming a member of the Power Rank. My name is Ed Feng, your host for the Football Analytics Show. This is the first episode of the 2022 preview series. Every day this week, we'll be bringing you another episode. Edward Egros will also be contributing to this as well. The Power Ranks sports betting newsletter brings PhD-level analytics to football. Valuable, concise, entertaining. Those are my 3 goals with every correspondence. To get this free service, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better football betting through predictive analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. This podcast is also sponsored by listeners like you. These kind, generous people also get access to a premium episode every month. To learn more, go to patreon.com/footballanalytics. Once again, that's patreon.com/footballanalytics.